Hello, I'm Claire Jewitt, and this is the Diary of an Orange Cat. The diary entries of a thoughtful, slightly neurotic ginger cat named Weasley, written from a small harbour community in New Zealand. Tonight's episode finds Ron in the depths of romantic despair after falling heavily for a glamorous pedigree ragdoll called Cookie. Concerned for both his dignity and mental well-being, Weasley, Squeak and Serafina attempt an intervention involving music, friendship and the formation of a feline singing group called the Gingernuts. Unfortunately, finding a fourth member proves rather more difficult than expected. And now, Weasley's diary. There are times in life when a cat needs his friends to rally around him. This is particularly true if said cat has recently embarrassed himself in front of an extremely attractive pedigree ragdoll and is now alternating between delusions of grandeur and complete emotional devastation. Ron claims he's merely misunderstood. Personally, I think he's having some sort of extended catnip-related identity crisis. Either way, Squeak and I agreed that what he needed was a positive distraction. We decided that the obvious solution was to form a singing group. Wednesday, 4th of November, 2020. I knew as soon as Ron came out of our kitchen today that there was something wrong. He wasn't licking his lips like he usually did after a stolen meal, a clear sign that he hadn't eaten the remains of the fresh steak and kidney cat food that I'd deliberately left in my bowl for him. Squeak also noticed this out-of-character behaviour and attempted to tiptoe surreptitiously into the kitchen. Squeak can move fast when there's food involved, but he's not an accomplished tiptoer. He ended up doing a sort of somersault action of the kind that's usually associated with action-adventure thriller sequences, and something that I doubted he could ever repeat. Great tufts of black and white fur were unleashed on the carpet, and all he was able to squeak in apology was, "Sorry,
Winter coat."
"Winter coat," said Ron, brightening noticeably. "That can go down on our possibles list." I obediently added this to the inventory of best ideas for our band name, directly underneath Three Cat Night, the Deaf Leopards, Nuclear Kittens, and Stone Temple Cats. Ron has been depressed for a while now, and I'm not sure if it's true depression or if he's just undergoing a series of disturbed catnip-induced thought processes. He's certainly been acting particularly strangely of late. One minute he has this exaggerated view that he's the coolest cat in Diamond Harbour and deserves to be highly regarded in the community, and the next minute he's wallowing in the depths of despair and saying things like, "Sometimes I just want to go outside and pay one of those cat-hating locals $10 to run over my head." This gloomy remark came just after he'd rather clumsily attempted to chat up the rag doll who'd recently appeared on the Diamond Harbour cat scene. I could hardly blame him. She was exquisite with the stunningly blue eyes and silky cream coat that are distinctive to her breed. I have some ragdoll in my lineage, but not to this extent. This cat is all class, definitely a pure breed, and totally out of Ron's league. She'd run away from Ron in a state of fright, and I can't say I blame her. Ron pounced on her and said something in a breathless pant that sounded like, "Would you like to lie down with me this evening?" Evidently he'd meant to say "Voulez-vous coucher avec moi ce soir" in French, but his nervous state had brought about a breakdown in communication between his brain and his mouth, and it had come out in English. Even with the benefit of contextual knowledge, I'm not entirely sure that this was a good opening gambit. Since then, Squeak and I have been flourishing a tempting array of strategies in an effort to distract him from these peculiar mood swings. Serafina has also been actively involved in this endeavour. Her suggestions, however, are limited to vet visits and antidepressant medication. To her credit, Serafina did some diligent groundwork and dug out some useful background information about the newcomer. Superior knowledge which she delighted in imparting to Squeak and me, whom she considers to be lesser mortals. She's a pedigree ragdoll called Cookie, and she lives in Purao with her big brother Beau. If you ask me, I'd say Ron has fallen in love or perhaps developed an unhealthy obsession with her. He's been stalking her ever since she arrived. At this point, Squeak and I established a sort of masculine bond and decided to cut Serafina out of any future discussions regarding Ron's state of mind. This was a job for the boys. It was obvious that Ron didn't have any chance with this girl, and the idea of him being in love was clearly ridiculous. I shuddered at the thought of what Big Bro or Bo or whatever his name is would do if he ever found out that a puny orange bitzer like Ron had designs on his little sister. This could involve a fight, and I was glad I had Squeak on my side. "We need to distract him," suggested Squeak. "Make him see that there are other things in life besides stalking Cookie and making such a dick of himself that he wants to become roadkill." Squeak and I presented Ron with a veritable potpourri of invigorating suggestions. The only one to create even a glimmer of interest was Squeak's idea of resurrecting our singing group and doing a live performance on the Godley House grounds. "We might even get a gig at Live at the Point," said Ron enthusiastically when we'd suggested this idea. "At this early stage, I think we just need to get one song down pat and decide on a band name," I said with finality before Ron got too far ahead of himself. We decided on a rendition of The Lion Sleeps Tonight and, after a lengthy debate, settled on the Gingernuts as our group name. Squeak, who was black and white, wasn't entirely on board with the name. Ron, however, was insistent that since Gingernuts are cookies, this was the perfect name for our band. So much for distracting him from his cookie obsession. We ignored this, though, because Ron hasn't been this motivated for weeks. Ron opens the song in a falsetto voice, which isn't brilliant, but we think we can get away with toning his mic down and having a recording playing in the background. Then I come in with my whim-aways. Squeak does the main vocals with me whim-awaying and Ron wee-dee-deeing in the background. We're starting to sound pretty good, though, although, strictly speaking, we aren't exactly a quartet yet and need a male cat with a decent voice to do the bum bars and hold the whole thing together. Serafina has been standing in, but this is only until we can find our fourth member, and then she'll take on the role of roadie. We asked my brother Winston, who has a surprisingly good voice, but his audition song was something about getting knocked down, getting up again, and drinking whiskey and vodka. Ron thought it sounded like a chant you would sing at a rugby match, and Squeak said it was totally unsuitable for the Gingernuts. Serafina told us that Winston used to sing in a psychedelic rock band. Surely not. Monday, 16th of November, 2020. Serafina put the word out that we're looking for a male ginger cat to join the Gingernuts, but there's been very little interest and time is running out. The first hopeful was a greasy ginger cat called Axel. He strode confidently into the house, had a few bites of my steak and kidney cat food, farted, and then asked where my dirt box was. When I said I didn't use a dirt box, he pissed all over the carpet, sang a few lines of Sweet Child of Mine, and then went home. We said we'd get back to him. That was a week ago, and I'm still in the bad books at home over the cat wee on the carpet. "Weasley Spanton Jewitt! You're old enough to know better!" screamed Mummy. The disappointed look on her face and the use of my full name for disciplinary reasons tells me it's going to take some time to work my way back to being Mummy's little weasel poof. The second contender, Gary, was a ginger cat who we all knew vaguely. He showed promise, but unfortunately he only managed to make it to one practice session, and a few days later he had to pull out altogether because one of his kittens had gastroenteritis. "He'll have his hands full trying to stop the rest of the litter from getting infected," remarked Squeak. "I didn't know he had kittens," I said. "Yes," nodded Ron. "He shacked up with Snowflake last year. They've got 7 kittens, would you believe?" "4 girls and 3 boys, evidently," said Squeak. "Gary will definitely have his paws full." "Particularly with Hypo getting uterine inertia," said Ron. "Yes, I heard about that," said Squeak. We happily went on discussing Gary and his family. Ron and Squeak both seemed to have an extraordinary amount of details about the birth. "Have you 3 finished gossiping?" said Serafina. "We've only got one more audition before we call it quits and accept that our quartet will have to be a trio." "Wheel 'em in then," said Ron, and a charismatic chocolate-brown cat called Marlin entered. As soon as he opened his mouth, the room filled with his powerful liquid voice that had a richness and range that none of us had expected. He sang an intense and emotional ballad with a hint of melancholy that he'd written himself. By the time he'd finished, Serafina was in tears and Squeak was speechless. "I think he's a bit too good, don't you?" I said after Marlin had left. "I can't imagine him being content with doing the bumba-bumbas in our little group." "He must have a 3-octave range," proclaimed a flabbergasted Squeak. "He's amazing," said Serafina dreamily. She clearly hadn't fully recovered after the audition. "Well, he's not Ginger," said Ron, bringing us all down to earth. "And apart from having a voice to die for, he seems like a genuinely nice guy. Definitely the sort of cat that needs to be kept away from the Gingernuts. Would you prefer having Axel farting and peeing or Gary fussing over his kittens?" said Squeak. "Besides, I'm not Ginger either." Yeah, but you don't matter," said Ron, and Squeak skulked off home in a huff. Sunday, 29th of November, 2020. My last diary entry was written nearly 2 weeks ago, and although we still don't have the fourth nut, as Ron puts it, we've been practising regularly and are now sounding quite sharp, although Squeak says there's plenty of room for improvement. All our hopes were dashed today, though, when Ron informed us that he'd bumped into a friend of an old girlfriend of his who told him the bad news that the Live at the Point Sunday afternoon music sessions at the Godley House grounds in Diamond Harbour weren't taking place this summer because of COVID. Damn! You've been listening to The Diary of an Orange Cat by Claire Jewitt. Next time, tensions rise underneath the deck when Serafina calls an extraordinary mindfulness meeting under urgency after Facebook drama erupts in the Diamond Harbour community group over feral cats, heritage sites, cyclists, 1080 and Cookie requiring rescue from a tank by the volunteer fire brigade. Things rapidly descend into chaos. Thank you for listening, and don't forget to follow, rate and share the podcasts wherever you get your podcasts.